All right, so this is Justin Peterson and Masten Childers for the first ever episode of the podcast, It's Not Fair. And Masten, we obviously decided to call it It's Not Fair because that's a common theme that we hear from our clients, right?
On a daily basis.
Yep. And we want to talk through some of these things as to why we think people think either their situation is not fair, maybe the system's not fair, how things are being handled, maybe they feel like that's not fair as well. And so let's just start out. I'll start out by asking you, what do you think the first moment is where you realized where our clients or the people we're representing think, well, this isn't fair as it comes to as it pertains to litigation itself?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of answers, but the largest overarching theme is just how long litigation takes, right? Despite all of our best efforts, sometimes because of the way the other side handles things just take a long time. And then you've got the courts and they take a long time. And that's something that I've always liked, what you and I do differently is our goal is to get things done as fast as possible for people, because to sit around and wait to be compensated for the injuries that somebody else has caused, it's not fair. It isn't. And taking long is not fair.
And it's a burden to these clients, right? To go through litigation. How often do we see like their shoulders just drop? Like, right. It's over. Like, thank goodness, even though they're, only minimally involved in the litigation itself. Right. The resolution seems to be a burden off their shoulders, right?
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you had to say to a client, "This is a marathon, not a sprint"?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But that isn't fair. It doesn't make it fair. Explaining it to them does not make it fair.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
What about you? What made that stick with you?
Yeah, I think one of the things I think about when I think about the litigation burden not being real fair is people really don't like the fact that the defense gets to tell their story, right? Like, it's so easy if you're in a situation like this and you've never been through it before that you start thinking of all the pros of your case. Like, I was hit by this commercial vehicle truck. They ran a red light. It's all their fault. But once the defense starts peeling away the onion, it's like, oh, well, you have had back pain for 10 years, right? You've been in 3 other accidents. It's not your fault, but and so they see the defense coming out and they think, well, that's not a fair scenario. But I think one of our jobs is to make sure we're advising them of all these different risks. What is the risk in moving forward? What does your prior medical history look like? What are the defenses going to be,
Yeah, no, you're right, and I think one of our biggest roles is to even the playing field, right? The court system is designed supposedly so everybody has a fair shot, both sides,
right?
And our job is to make your story, our client's story, be the one that the jury listens to.
Sure,
right?
Sure. And so, that's a big part of our goal is to work with clients to have a great understanding of the factual scenario so that when the defense starts, pulling their punches, we know how to defend them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think most defendants would honestly say their case is not fair when we're on the other side. I'm just going to go ahead.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
It's not fair when you come up against us.
It's not fair. I just got sued. Right. Yeah.
Right.
So fair enough. The next what do people get wrong? What do people think happens after a serious accident, especially involving maybe a commercial vehicle?
I think the common misconception that I run into when we have the initial kind of conversations with clients after they hire us is that these defendants don't just start throwing money at them. Right? Yeah. If defendants are throwing money at you too early on, chances are you're leaving money on the table, right? They're just trying to take advantage of you in the early stages of what could be a pre-litigation issue.
How often do we look at our clients and tell them, listen, if this insurance company was going to treat you fairly, we wouldn't have this big, beautiful business on our hands, right? Yeah. They're actually shocked by that. Like, I cannot believe they're like they're at fault. That's what happened. How dare they contest that their commercial vehicle driver ran a red light, right?
Right.
But then they get an attorney and they start creating these defenses, and it's pretty amazing to watch. And I can understand where clients would think it's not fair.
Oh, sure. I think the best time for them to understand that is if they happen to reach out. Let's say they try and resolve their claim without a lawyer first, or they just have a couple of initial conversations with an insurance company. Right. They are dealing with an adjuster for, let's just say State Farm. The minute they hire us, that adjuster switches. right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that to me exemplifies how unfair insurance companies treat individuals. That's why we exist.
And it's not just lowball offers, it's lack of communication. I had a call from one of our former clients yesterday, and he was like, hey, I didn't want to call you. It wasn't a major accident, but I was in another motor vehicle accident in November, right? And we're sitting here in April, right? Or almost April, right? And so he was like, I didn't call you. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but they won't even call me back. You know, I went to the ER. I had a couple treatments. I'm much better now, but I can't get my vehicle paid for. I can't get my medical bills paid. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happens. You know, if we're not out being aggressive, and that's why, you know, luckily we have laws in Kentucky that prohibit insurance companies from acting in bad faith, right? And we try to enforce those laws. So.
So, Justin, another thing that I love talking about, especially with you when we have an opportunity to work on stuff together, is cases that almost went sideways, right?
Sure.
And I think that in the days of AI, it's a daily basis that a client will call and be like, "Well, I ran this through ChatGPT, right?" And And so that assumes that every case is there's a script on how a case is going to go. It's going to do this and it's going to do that. There are some of those that work, but there are plenty of cases out there that almost go sideways. And so talking about a trucking or a commercial vehicle case, can you think of one that almost went sideways on you?
This is an easy toss-up because I'll never forget. This gentleman comes in, he's got some pretty serious injuries, and he says, this semi truck pulled out in front of me and I rear-ended it, kind of in the side. It was more of a side swipe than a rear end, but it was the back side of the vehicle. And we say, okay, well, if that's the way it happened, then, that's a pretty clear, factual scenario that's in your favor. A truck pulls in front of you and you side swipe it. You have some bad injuries. Well, unbeknownst to him, the insurance company, because he came to us way late in the game, which is a whole nother problem, right? Just you come to us too late, that there may be evidentiary issues. Well, for this guy, he did not know the insurance company had gotten a traffic cam at the light. And this guy had rear-ended a parked semi. Semi was not moving. And if you look at the video, there was no question that semi was not moving. And so I call him in and I say, hey, and I'm not obviously not going to say his name, but I call him in and I say, hey, listen, here's the video, man. This is totally different than what you said. There was a side swipe, but you side swiped a parked vehicle. The case almost went wrong, but where did we win? Believe it or not, we win this case. And what happened was the semi was parked in such a way that it was supposed to have cones out. It was supposed to follow the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Act and be parked in such a way to prohibit this guy who should have been looking in front of him, right? Who claimed the accident happened one way, but it didn't, which is attorney-client privilege. So the insurance company didn't know that this guy didn't tell me the truth at the beginning. So we were still able to make a case out of that. The guy did get a very good recovery in that situation. He was lucky that we found violations, because the video, when you first look at it, you throw up your hands and say, oh my gosh, he's 100% at fault. But if you actually know what you're doing with these types of cases, as you do, you look at the Federal Motor and you say, wow, there's no cones. Actually, that video is good for us because it shows this truck was parked in violation of the act. And so we did win that case, but that almost went very wrong for that gentleman. So tell us the truth. Right. What about you? What's an example that you might have?
I think that a lot of times when cases almost go sideways, it's when you have a problem with coverage, right? A lot of times you think, or when we're talking to people and we're dealing with insurance issues, it's dealing with, what is available for you. It's whether or not the insurance company is going to treat you as the plaintiff, you as the injured party fairly. But listen, insurance companies treat everybody equally. They treat everybody unfairly. They treat their own insureds unfairly a lot of times. And so we have had plenty of cases where you have a great case, a great injury, and great liability, and then you've got an insurance company that's just saying to their insured, the person at fault for the injury, you don't have coverage, and this is why you don't have coverage. And that's what I've always loved about what we do, what you and I do, is that we don't just take that and be done, right? We're not going to listen to an insurance company that says, well, sure, but there's no coverage. No, we get into the insurance policies and figure out how to create coverage for the at-fault party, right? There have been plenty of mediations where we've come away thinking, oh no, there might not be any coverage, and therefore our client's going to be left out alone in the cold with no recovery. But we finagle our way by reading through the insurance policies and get the insurance company worried enough to where they'll pay.
Yeah. And that's absolutely a skill most personal injury attorneys don't have. You know, you and I, we started out on the defense side. So we were doing coverage opinions. We were looking at insurance coverage issues. And that just came up in a pretty big case of ours, right? Where the insurance company said, no coverage for this incident, never going to happen. We're not making you any offers. We file a lawsuit. The defense attorney calls it, what in the world are you doing? There's no coverage for this. And the whole time we're asking for the policy, where we finally get the policy. Yeah. And it doesn't have the exclusion that they claimed was in there. So there is coverage for that particular case. So, you know, absolutely, that's a skill set that we're blessed to have. And we got a great team of coverage attorneys who do review these policies to open up the coverage, because I agree with Masten 100%. You know, the biggest problem in our world is lack of insurance or lack of resources to go after when there's a catastrophic injury, right? Yeah. Yep. So when we're talking about, you know, whether it's the intake process, pre-lit, lit, whatever, what's an early mistake you think our clients make without probably realizing it?
I think it's being too open with the bad guys, right? Like, I don't know how else to say it, but you know, you're an honest person. You live your life being honest and not being full of it, right? And so when you're in an accident and the insurance company for the at-fault person reaches out to you and say, hey, we just need to get your statement, you don't think about the fact that being honest or upfront with that person can be turned back around against you
100%, 100%.
Right? I'm not saying don't be honest. You should always be honest, right? The one of the rules I live by is if you aren't honest, you're going to get caught eventually, right? It just happens. Sure. So always be honest, but understand that when you're who your audience is. So if you're being honest with somebody whose goal it is to find fault in what you're saying to them, they may take what you've said to them, even though you've been honest, and twist it and turn it around and use it against you. Don't do that. Let us control. That's why you got to let your lawyers control the narrative.
Yep, and they're recording you when you have those early conversations. Well, how are you doing? I'm doing all right. And then, you know, the next question comes, and then 7 months later, we're going to settle the case. Well, 2 days after the accident, I have a recording here. They said they were all right. Right? Oh yeah, I mean, it's an absolute trick they use, and people don't realize it. You're right. Yeah. It's honesty. So, I think mistakes are not calling us soon enough. You know, there's so much evidence dissipation, especially in the commercial vehicle world, where we want to get out there, we want to inspect. There's so many potential issues where there could be fault or could be violations of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Act or other things that we need to look at. And the later you come to us because you, quote, decided to handle it by yourself, you thought you could just run with this thing. And then once you realize that the situation is truly unfair when you don't have a lawyer, whether it's us or someone who specializes in these things, go get a lawyer. Like go as soon as humanly possible, right? They're operating on a contingent fee, so you're going to pay the same price whether you get them the day after the accident or 2 years after the accident, right? So get out there early. That's the number one mistake I see, is people either trying to handle it by themselves, or they decide, you know, I've lost this loved one, we're going to grieve, we're going to get around to it, and then 9-10 months later, then they call us, right? It's like, wow, there's a statute of limitations, you know, we're kind of up against that, you know, especially in the med mal context, right? How many people come to us almost too late in the game for us to be able to do anything? So
yeah, and I think it has to be said, you got to choose the right lawyer. Yeah. You know, insurance companies and defendants and hospitals and nursing homes, they know who the lawyers are that know what they're doing with regard to those types of cases.
That's a great point.
And so if you choose the wrong lawyer to get going, you may realize that later, and you may switch horses midstream, and that causes problems. There's always a catch-up period. There's always a devaluation of the case as a result of how far along the other lawyer was getting. But you know, it's really important that you pick the right person from the get-go.
Absolutely. And you and I used to do reports for insurance adjusters to evaluate the case. Usually that first paragraph is what are the facts of the case. The second paragraph is who's their lawyer. Yeah. Right. Who's the plaintiff lawyer on that side? And if you don't think insurance companies are evaluating your lawyer and the quality of the lawyer you have, then you don't understand what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Justin, you know, really, why does all this matter? Why are trucking and commercial vehicle cases different than what people think they are?
Well, there's different laws that apply. Number one, I mean, that's the biggest thing. There's different standards that apply. There's different laws. There's different entities you can sue. So, for example, if a truck goes out and is on an icy road and crashes, if that's a normal vehicle, they might have a defense because they didn't anticipate that black ice, right? They might have a sudden emergency defense. Well, trucking companies are much different because they have these logistic companies. They're supposed to plan their routes. They're supposed to take approved routes. And when they don't do these things, that allows us to go after them to hold them accountable for any damages that they caused. And so trucking and commercial vehicle cases require a ton of work up front. Usually requires experts up front, as opposed to your standard, I'm sitting at a stop sign and someone rear ends me. Well, we know what happened. Did the airbag deploy? Well, yes, the airbag. Okay, so we know we have a 25 to 30 mile an hour plus change in velocity or delta V. So we know these things pretty well, but in a commercial vehicle or a semi-truck context, it requires a whole different set of experience and the way we pursue it for sure.
And why is it that do you think that people don't really understand what goes on behind the scenes in these trucking cases?
Well, they just don't know that. I mean, they've never been through the process before. They don't know there's a different set of laws. They don't understand. They know. And in fact, if anything, they think it's easier because this big old truck just creamed me, right? Oh, this is the easiest case in the world. And like you said earlier, they're just going to pay me this big check, right? Which never happens. Yeah. It never happens that way. And so I think people just assume they're easier when actually they're much more complicated. There's different areas of recovery that we need to look into, like the logistics companies. Is there a broker involved? Sometimes it's how was the semi-truck loaded? If it's a load issue, how are they load bearing and which entity loaded it? Was it a Walmart? Was it a Lowe's? Who was this that loaded this? And why did they load it in such a way that caused that truck to tip over and crash? So a lot of different issues to look at, and we can only do that once we investigate.
Sure. Is there anything that you wish that someone knew before they ever got involved in one of these situations?
I wish they knew your number and my number, right when it happened, it's so hard to tell people who have been through a traumatic event, call a lawyer, right? That's literally the last thing I would think about.
Yeah.
It's calling a lawyer, right? I would think about my family. I would think about what's just happened to me. I would think about, oh my goodness, what are the medical bills that are coming up? Am I going to miss work? Of course, there's going to be a million things on your mind other than I need a lawyer to go investigate this. But the reality is, we need to get out there quickly.
Sure.
So, Masten, if someone's involved in a serious accident, especially one that's involving a commercial vehicle, what would you tell them to look for in searching out the appropriate attorney to handle their case?
I mean, it's a good question. You're kind of inundated on a daily basis with lawyers' results, right? I mean, we do it, everybody does it, but it gets lost, right? And what do those actually mean? You don't know the facts behind those results. You don't know what work went into achieving those results, whether or not they were just, fairly easy for them or whatever. You just don't know. So it's not results. I don't believe that is what you should go off of. What you ought to do is take the time to call the lawyer that you look at the advertising. Fine. That's how you get to know who's out there, what your options are. But I think the most important thing is, has that lawyer handled a similar type of case?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
sometimes it's even important, have you hired a similar case against the same defendant, especially when you're looking at commercial trucking?
Oh yeah.
A lawyer's knowledge, you can't buy that. Their institutional knowledge is not something that can be marketed out there. If you're a lawyer that's handled 15 cases against the same commercial defendant, you're going to know what things to look for in that new case for the new client against that same commercial defendant. So look for experience. Look for experience with those people.
Absolutely. A client should be able to call the lawyer during the intake process and get an understanding of what a game plan looks like, right? Yeah. Like what I try to do when I get a phone call that comes in and they give me whatever factual scenario they've been involved in, I try to give them my game plan.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know everything at that moment, but you and I have had enough experience with all these different types of personal injury cases. If we hear a fact pattern, we know generally strategically at least what we want to start looking into
Sure.
or what we want to do. So that's one thing I think we do a good job of on the front end is educating people. Hey, you've never met me. I've never met you. But after listening to what happened, this is the thing that if you choose to hire us, these are the things we're going to do. And if your lawyer can't lay out a plan before you hire them or before you pay them or whatever you're doing, if they can't do that, you really need to consider whether that's the right person for the job and whether they really have the results that you're talking about, right? I mean, how many people say there's a result that may not be completely accurate, right?
Well, right, and this is I'll call this a public service announcement. But if you go meet with a lawyer and they're eager or too willing to tell you what they think your case is worth during the first initial meeting, run. Yeah. That's not accurate. Look, I think I know, generally speaking, what somebody's case is worth when they come to us initially, just based on our experience. But you don't know. It's like what we've been saying this whole day is you don't know when things go sideways. You don't know all the facts. You don't really know what a case is worth until you've gotten your hands into it.
Oh, absolutely. I tell a lot of clients that because it is a pretty common question in intake is what do these kind of cases settle for? And my answer every time is always the same. If a lawyer tells you what the value of your case is without knowing the facts or where your injury is going to go, how it's going to heal, whether it's going to heal. If someone gives you that, run. Yeah. Because they just lied to you. Yeah. And the first question you ask them, they have lied to you, and I promise you it's only going to get worse. So I tell everybody, that's a great point. Great point. Episode 1, that was fun.
A great time.
You look happy.
I'm super happy.
Okay, good.
Yeah, this is me happy.
All right. It's not fair. Masten thinks that the fact that he's going to be on a microphone is not fair. So
life's not fair.
That's episode 1 of It's Not Fair.